For centuries, the Kaladi Bhattathiri family of Kerala maintained a reputation that defied religious norms. Their lineage was so potent that Lord Ganesha, the elephant-headed deity, was said to reside within their household as a physical, permanent guest. A gruesome massacre at the family's origin point forged this divine alliance. The tragedy began when an early patriarch and a friend traveled toward the massive crowds and decorated elephants of the Thrissur. As night fell, they found themselves stranded near the Yakshi Perumbu, a stretch of land feared for its malevolent spirits. Two women of striking beauty appeared on the path, offering the travelers shelter in a nearby mansion. Exhausted and lured by their appearance, the two men agreed to follow them inside. The friend, suspicious of their hosts, clutched a copy of the Devi Mahatmyam throughout the night. The sacred text acted as a barrier. The woman in his room found herself unable to cross the threshold or touch him as he lay awake. In the adjacent room, the patriarch was not so protected. Through the wall, his friend listened to the sound of bones snapping and flesh being consumed. The women were yakshis, vampiric demons, and the patriarch was their meal. At dawn, the friend fled the empty grove, carrying only the nails and topknot of the murdered man back to his pregnant widow. This slaughter ended the family's life as quiet priests, setting them on a path toward aggressive, retaliatory sorcery. The murdered man's son was born a prodigy. Upon learning the details of his father's death, he abandoned traditional Vedic studies to focus entirely on acquiring the tools for supernatural revenge. He spent years in extreme penance directed toward the sun god Surya. He subjected himself to rituals so severe, they eventually forced a divine manifestation. Surya appeared in human form, granting the boy a divine grimoire and a title, Suryakaladi. This book contained the exact formulas required to command the spirit world. The text gave the boy absolute authority over the supernatural. Its incantations did not request favors from spirits, but issued commands that the spirits were cosmically bound to obey. Suryakaladi now held the power to override natural laws by reciting specific verses. He had the weapon he needed, but he lacked the wisdom to survive its use. Surya used the grimoire to summon every yakshi in existence to a single sacrificial fire. He identified his father's killer among the screaming spirits and cast her into the flames. As she burned, the yakshi cursed Surya. On the 41st day, his lungs would fail, and he would die gasping for air. Surya ignored the threat. He later accepted a contract to exorcise a stubborn Gandharva spirit from a queen, using the most violent and restricted rituals in his book to break the spirit's will. The defeated Gandharva issued a second curse. On the 12th day, Surya would die from a total and agonizing urinary obstruction. Both spirits provided the same escape. Surya would survive if he managed to enter the Thiruvalur temple on the appointed day of his death. On the day the curses matured, Surya stood inside the Thiruvalur temple grounds. He felt invincible, believing the temple's sanctity had neutralized the supernatural threats. Suddenly, a desperate urge to urinate forced him to leave the sanctuary for the bathhouse. Each time he stepped out, the urge vanished. Each time he returned to the sanctuary, it struck again with doubling intensity. Eventually, his system locked. He collapsed in the courtyard, his throat constricting as he struggled to pull in a single breath. As he lay dying, an ethereal voice reminded him of his error. The grimoire provided perfect spells, but it never required the master to perform them personally. By doing the work himself, he had invited the direct recoil of every spirit he broke. Suryakaladi died in the temple dirt. He proved that even divine magic is fatal when the user lacks the patience to foresee its consequences. Generations later, the family remained powerful but cautious, operating out of a sprawling estate. They sought a way to exercise power without the lethal risks Surya had taken. A guard at the estate roasted coconuts over a fire to ward off the morning chill. He soon noticed a small, invisible trunk reaching out to take the pieces of roasted fruit he set aside. A Bhattathiri descendant happened to walk by and immediately recognized the invisible guest, Lord Ganesha, manifesting in the world as a hungry, juvenile elephant. The Bhattathiri used the guards' roasted coconuts to lay a trail, enticing the deity to move from the groves and into the family's private shrine. The family had successfully bypassed the danger of high-level sorcery by hosting a deity as a permanent resident. They no longer needed to chant for power, they simply had to ask their roommate for a favor. With Ganesha at their disposal, the Bhattathiris became untouchable. Their magic shifted from a tool of survival into a means of humiliating their rivals. When a rival sorcerer named Kunchamon Potty docked his fleet at the estate and failed to show proper respect, he woke the next morning to find his primary transport had disappeared from the water. The Bhattathiri pointed to the top of a massive tree. Ganesha had physically lifted the heavy boat from the river and balanced it precariously on the highest branches. This map illustrates a later territorial dispute. When the royal court of the Zamarin argued that the family's land was legally on the south side of the river, the Bhattathiris didn't bother with an appeal. They simply asked Ganesha to intervene. The deity plunged his tusk into the soil and physically altered the earth, carving a new channel that forced the river to flow south of the house, instantly winning the legal argument. The Bhattathiris had abandoned the study of magic for the effortless manipulation of geography. They were now rewriting the physical world to suit their own convenience. The end of their reign began with a merchant's plea. He had lost a massive galleon to the deep ocean and offered half the ship's enormous wealth if the family could bring it back to the surface. The Bhattathiri patriarch, fixated on the merchant's gold, immediately ordered Ganesha to march into the sea and retrieve the wreckage. Ganesha refused, stating that the task was an abuse of his presence and beneath his divine nature. But the patriarch, driven by greed, used his influence to force the deity's hand. Ganesha finally relented. He walked into the dark, churning waves and used his immense strength to lift the vessel. The merchant's ship burst through the surface, restored by a god's labor. The cost of the gold was the family's divinity. Disgusted by their transition from scholars to greedy contractors, Ganesha revoked his physical presence. He declared that while he might still hear their prayers, he would never again be seen by human eyes. The Kaladi Bhattathiris had conquered demons and commanded gods. They lost everything not to a superior sorcerer, but to the weight of their own human hubris.